In this video tutorial, we explain D.I.D record parameters and how translation rules may modify these parameters for a range of D.I.D numbers. To configure a D.I.D record for a range of numbers, the type field must be set to range, and the range must be defined using the range start and range end fields in the basic parameters section. Only numeric values are accepted when a D.I.D range is defined. This range is used to simplify adding a large set of D.I.D numbers to the system and allows a single rule to be applied to all of them at once. Let's recall that Sippy uses remote type authentication to authenticate remote calls from D.I.D providers. It also uses late type authentication, also referred to as the late recognition method, to reach the D.I.D number after the authentication of any call via the digest or authentication rule of any account without the use of D.I.D pool. Because the parameters and the logic of applying translation rules for late and remote authentication types are significantly different, these are discussed separately. When a remote incoming call is received, remote type authentication is used. For this authentication type, the mandatory parameter is incoming D.I.D CLD, which may either be left empty, in the case of a D.I.D range use, or configured with a translation rule. If left empty, it is assumed to be equal to the D.I.D range specified in the basic parameters section, and this range is used to match the CLD in the SIP request of an incoming remote call from the D.I.D provider. If a translation rule is specified in this field, the rule is applied to the D.I.D range defined in basic parameters to produce a modified range. This modified range is then matched against the CLD in incoming remote SIP requests for authentication. This resulting range is referred to as the authentication range. For example, if the D.I.D range start and range end are set to 1212, 500, 0100 and 1212, 500, 0300, and the D.I.D provider sends SIP requests with CLDs in the same numeric range but prefixed with a plus sign, a translation rule is required. In this case, a plus sign is added to the D.I.D range defined in basic parameters. This transforms the authentication range to +121250000100 through +121250000300, allowing full matching with the values received from the D.I.D provider. The incoming CLI field can be used as an additional optional authentication factor. It is specified in the incoming CLI field and can contain numeric, literal, or mixed values. This value is matched against the CLI in the incoming SIP request, and the call is authenticated only if the match is successful. Only one exact value is allowed in the incoming CLI field. If multiple CLI values are required for authentication, multiple remote authentication rules must be created accordingly. The CLI translation rule is used to modify the CLI from the incoming SIP request to produce the outgoing CLI. It should be noted that the CLI translation rule has no role in authentication and is used only after authentication to transform the incoming CLI into the outgoing CLI. The provider's IP address can also be used as an optional authentication factor. For that, the vendor and connection must be selected. Although optional, it is highly recommended to be used in the vast majority of cases to prevent unauthorized devices from sending calls to the D.I.D entity. To use the D.I.D provider's connection IP address for authentication, the vendor and connection names must be specified. The IP address configured for that D.I.D provider in the vendor connection section will be used. If all connections of a particular vendor are to be authenticated, only the vendor name should be specified, leaving the connection field as any. In this case, all connections belonging to that vendor will be checked. While reference is generally made to a D.I.D provider, the provider's name and connection IPs are configured in the Sippy vendors section, since a D.I.D provider is typically a vendor selling D.I.D traffic to Sippy. The D.I.D translation rule is used to transform the authenticated incoming CLD into the outgoing CLD number within the authentication range. For example, with a D.I.D range of 1212, 500, 0100 to 1212, 500, 0300, the range is transformed by adding a plus sign for authentication, resulting in an authentication range of +121250000100 to +121250000300. For any authenticated call with a number from this authentication range in the SIP request, a D.I.D translation rule may be applied to generate a different outgoing CLD. For instance, if an outgoing CLD range containing only the last 3 digits, from 100 to 300, is required, the prefix +1 2125000 should be removed from the authenticated range. In addition to authentication and routing parameters, charging parameters can also be configured for remote calls. The buying charging group field references a buying charging group configured in the charging group section and represents the costs that Sippy pays to the D.I.D provider. The selling charging group references an incoming tariff and its associated rates configured in the tariff section and is used to charge customers for incoming D.I.D traffic. For on-net calls received from an internal account of the Sippy soft switch, late type authentication is applied. All fields are blank. Vendor and connection are set to any, and buying charging group is set to no charge. All values in the late type authentication row are preset and cannot be changed. The range defined by the D.I.D start and D.I.D end parameters is used for late recognition. All translation rules and other remote authentication fields are irrelevant and not applicable for on-net calls. The D.I.D translation rule then produces the outgoing CLD range accordingly. Although the buying charging group is not relevant for on-net calls and is fixed to no charge, the selling charging group can still be assigned. This allows Sippy to charge clients for incoming on-net traffic in the same way as for incoming remote traffic. As can be seen, significant differences exist in how D.I.D record parameters are configured and how translation rules are applied for remote and on-net calls. A clear understanding of these differences provides a strong foundation for configuring the Sippy soft switch for various D.I.D call scenarios. This concludes our tutorial on D.I.D record parameters and translation rules for D.I.D ranges.